afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 20th of November 2012. It's just gone noon. Myself and Brian Gerrish are here in Plymouth as always. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, it's grey, cold, wet and very windy here in Plymouth. So our forecast for the rest of the week is grey, cold and very windy.
Exactly.
Look out the window if in doubt.
Okay, Mike, go first or yourself?
Mike's got an interest in Sally Bercow today, who was popping up again and stirring things to do with Twitter. And of course there's more to this than meets the eye.
Well, so following on from the McAlpine so-called gaffe, the Speaker's wife has broken a court ban by naming a runaway girl on Twitter. And the Mail is saying that she's going to be landed potentially with a £5,000 fine for contempt of court. But of course, this has got nothing to do with Twitter whatsoever. This is to do with Sally Bercow clearly having been deployed to use Twitter in order to try and bring some bad publicity against Twitter. Wouldn't matter how she had pushed this information out, whether it had been in the newspapers or whatever. She's chosen Twitter because Twitter is the target of this freedom of speech campaign which is going on at the moment, I believe. Sally Bercow seems to be the one who's pushing all the buttons in that direction at the moment.
Yeah, it's using and abusing Twitter in order to get attention focused on it. But all the reports that the UK column is receiving and what we're hearing from other alternative media sources is that the state is beginning to focus on Twitter and tweeting and of course the internet, because it's becoming apparent that the truth is actually getting out via these means. So our view is that this lady is deliberately interfering and focusing attention so that we can get a clamp down on these systems of communication. So more to it than meets the eye. Just keep an eye on the Speaker's wife and what she's up to. But of course the other man that we need to keep a very close eye on is Ken Clarke, the man who's been let loose in government without any proper job or portfolio. So just as with Mandy Mandelson, this man can cruise around putting his finger in whatever pie he wants to. And of course the key story here is that Ken Clarke has been pushing for yet more secret courts, being described by the Mail here as Clarke's secret courts belonging to a repressive regime and undemocratic. And with some irony, the article is saying that the Law Society has now suddenly popped out of the woodwork and is warning of the fact that we're headed into a police state with secret courts. And of course, Ken Clarke has used all of his powers, including formerly as Lord Chancellor, to try and push through the silencing of our courts. This is extremely dangerous, and if we lose our open and publicly controlled courts, then we are very quickly moving into a Stasi East German type state. So consider the first two items that we put together for you this afternoon. We've got an attack on the internet proceeding step by step. And of course, David Cameron's now started talking about attacking pornography on the internet. Well, of course, he and his colleagues have been helping to effectively promote this by supporting Google. And now we're seeing the tap turn the other way because it moves us towards control of these very important social media systems. So keep your eye on Kenneth Clarke. One of our favourite gentlemen on screen now, of course, Common Purpose Prime Minister David Cameron. And here he is apparently starting to lecture to the European Commission on what they can and can't do with the budget. And he's saying that the budget was not well spent, and he's highlighting the bumper pay of thousands of officials. Of course, what David Cameron doesn't talk about at all is that the European Union has still not in 17 or 18 years produced any formal audited and signed off accounts, and therefore David Cameron continues to commit malfeasance in public office by handing public money across to an unaccountable and criminal body. There's
I was just about to say, Boris Johnson saying that Mr Cameron should adopt Maggie Thatcher's hard line. Didn't the Miliband brothers come out with that just yesterday?
Well,
something similar.
You're absolutely right. I didn't notice that. Perhaps Mike could be kind enough just to pop that one up for us for a second. The previous slide there. For those who can read it on screen, yes, London Mayor Boris Johnson suggested Mr Cameron should adopt Margaret Thatcher's hardline stance on the EU and veto anything but a spending freeze. And of course what we're indicating is that Ed Miliband from the Labour Party was yesterday trying to convince the nation that he was in fact like Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. So it appears that both the Conservatives and now Labour are looking to wear Mrs Thatcher's dresses. Mike, you've got some fairly heavy information about what's happening in the Mediterranean at the moment.
So yesterday we mentioned that the British Navy, whatever we've got left of it, is in the Mediterranean in order to, on some kind of exercises that they may be redeployed to evacuate British citizens and give humanitarian aid in Syria. And now we have all of a sudden the US sending warships, this time to potentially evacuate American citizens from Israel. And this just seems to be too much of a coincidence. What is actually in the minds of the people that have sent these ships to the Mediterranean? They clearly see what's going on in the Middle East at the moment as a highly explosive situation. Bit of a tinderbox, could go off at any time. They want to be able to get their citizens out of these countries as quickly as possible. I think this is a very worrying development.
Well, to me, I think what it's signalling is that there's anticipation here. I think that what's actually happening at the moment is that Britain, as in David Cameron and his cohort, and indeed Obama and the American equivalent, know perfectly well there's going to be big trouble in Syria because they're going to do their best to make sure that that violence is escalated. And of course, we were reading in a variety of news sources yesterday that both Britain, America, and of course the European Union now are starting to clamour for restrictions on arms into the rebels in Syria, that those restrictions should be lifted. So all of the information that's coming into us at the moment indicates that the agenda is to inflame the situation in Syria because, of course, David Cameron has said that he wants to depose President Assad of Syria. And once David Cameron has spoken, of course, that's what has to happen in the world.
Well, that follows nicely into this article then, which is from Foreign Policy magazine. And for those who don't know, Foreign Policy is an American bi-monthly. It was founded by Samuel Huntington, who is the same Samuel Huntington that penned the Clash of Civilizations policy document for the Council on Foreign Relations. And then subsequently wrote a book, quite a big, heavy book. Well, it's not fairly heavy in the sense of the content. Samuel Huntington would very much like to see a clash of civilizations between Christianity and Islam. Anyway, Foreign Policy magazine is talking about France and Britain recognizing the Syrian opposition formally and being on the verge of sending, in quotes, defensive arms to this newly unified opposition. They're saying that the longer the Syrian civil war goes on, the more likely the entire Middle East will plunge into a prolonged period of instability. And they're saying that now that the presidential campaign in the United States is over, that really Obama needs to get a grip of this and make sure that arms are sent to the rebels on what they're calling an accelerated basis. There's simply no excuse for inaction, they say. And Foreign Policy magazine is you could consider it as being a policy setter, an agenda setter. They feed policy into various political organizations in the States through NGOs and so on into the American government. So it is a mouthpiece for the sort of Huntington, Brzezinski axis within the United States, and we should really pay attention to what they say. So they clearly feel that we should be arming the rebels. That's probably what's next.
Yeah. Well, simple question from me. Sorry, Louise. A simple question from me would be simply to ask where the money is coming from to arm the rebels. Is this coming out of the British defence budget, or has David Cameron printed off another small stack of money in order to provide these arms? I think this is a key question, and if anybody out there would like to ask Mr. Cameron how he's paying for arms for Syria, we would be very interested in the response.
Well, perhaps he's using money that's being invested in so-called dark pools, because according to CNN, dark pool trading is up 50%. Now, a dark pool is basically, well, let's put it this way: when you trade stocks and shares, you do so on an exchange, and every trade on the exchange is a public trade, so you know who's traded what. A number of years ago, banks established private exchanges where you go by invitation. These are known as dark pools, where the trading activity on these is only known to the people that are actually executing the trades and the people that are settling the trades. So any activity, any trading that's going on in dark pools is not known to the general public, there is a concern about this type of trading, because obviously any trading that goes on there, there's no transparency. Regulators don't get to see what's going on, and prices, any prices that are paid for assets in these kinds of exchanges aren't reported until after the deals are done. So you don't actually know if there's no transparency. You can't tell whether there's insider trading going on, and it's another example of the financial system escalating processes that generally can't be policed.
Right.
And if we follow on with that, we discover that that Reuters is reporting that the shadow banking industry, shadow banking is basically things like private equity funds, mutual funds, what are called special investment vehicles, or corporate bonds could be included in that. It's basically any financial activity that isn't happening through the banks, so hedge funds as well. So shadow banking activity is now hitting $67 trillion globally, and this should be noted is I think it's about $6 trillion higher than the amount of shadow banking activity that was happening just before the crash in 2007, 2008. And of course, that's no indication that there's going to be another crash, but it is highlighting the fact that really lessons have not been learned, and the same kind of activity is going on today as was happening just prior to the crash in 2007.
Can we actually say that shadow banking is fraud? Is this a fraudulent sector?
No, it's no more fraudulent than the banking sector as a whole contains fraudulent activity. It's just called shadow banking because it's kind of a hidden dark area. Unless you're working within a hedge fund, you don't necessarily know what hedge funds are doing, and in fact, hedge funds tend to behave in a way that they try to hide what they're doing as much as possible because they don't want their competitors to know what they're doing. But this basically came out of a report from the Financial Stability Board, which is part of the European Union, European Commission rather, and so the EC is expected to, they say, propose EU-wide rules for regulating shadow banking next year, but it's unlikely that that's really going to have any great effect. The size of this activity has to be remembered is largely based on leveraged funds, and so again we're talking about mountains of debt circulating here, and this is just a huge quantity of $62 trillion. It's actually, in the United States, it's a bigger component of the financial services sector than the banking system as a whole. And the other thing to note is that it's more than the total economic output of all the countries that are involved in this report.
If we had to put this in simple terms, Mike, for viewers and listeners today, am I right in saying this is yet a further indication that we have massive problems in the international banking scene, and that this is part of the demise and the ultimate collapse of that system? Is this an indicator, what we're seeing at the moment, what you're talking about here?
It's an indicator that nothing has changed and lessons haven't been learned as with regard to the speculation which led to the bubbles which burst in 2007. The same activities continue and in fact are getting bigger. There's no new regulation on this, and the problem is not being gripped by the authorities.
Right, and of course George Osborne at the moment believes that far from the economic situation and money in the banking situation in Britain, the priority for the Conservative Party is gay marriages. So clearly Mr. Osborne has got this potential problem under the microscope.
Indeed.
Okay. Well, we move on to Obama,
Yeah, it was just
who you've spotted here abroad.
I have spotted. Only yesterday when I was on the radio, one of the ladies popped in to the station and she said, Lou, what's Burma got? Why is Barack Obama so interested all of a sudden in Burma? He's been over in Burma. He's called their president Suu Kyi. Had become an icon of democracy after years spent in captivity. And he said that it marked the next step into a new chapter between the United States and Burma. So I came in and I had a little word with Mike and said, what is it Burma has that Obama wants? Mike.
Well, Burma's close to China. And if we look at what the Americans are doing with their sort of ring of steel of missile defences right around Russia and China, and they're placing missiles in Australia and other Southeast Asian areas. Burma is strategically important because this is somewhere that they're sort of angling to get another military base or two and a couple of missile defence launchers in these kind of areas. So I believe that's what's going on, just as with the so-called NATO missile defences, which they allege are really to protect against an attack from Iran. Everybody knows that in fact it's
the bigger picture.
It's a direct assault on Russia's sense of security. So this is the same kind of thing going on, and this is why Cameron and Obama are pushing for Aung San Suu Kyi to become a more prominent political figure within Burma, because they expect her to become the leader of that country, and then all gloves are off. They'll get to put whatever they want in there.
Makes sense.
Right, of course, part of the explanation is in the picture itself, because when politicians start kissing the babies and kissing people, you know they're up to no
They're
good.
up to something.
So what have you got for us here? Natural news.
Natural news, well done again. Picking up this, that people in Barnsley, parents in Barnsley have been really surprised to find that up to 221 children had botched vaccinations. Beginning in January 2009, children were mistakenly given combination vaccines for diphtheria, whooping cough, polio, tetanus, Hib, measles, mumps and rubella, when they should have been given the jabs individually in accordance to proper medical procedures. This is shocking. The parents have taken their kids down to their GP to get their jabs. They've been given one jab altogether. Action apparently was taken immediately once it was identified to ensure no further vaccinations were given. Head of Public Health in Barnsley said that the GP practice is now giving immunisations in accordance with national guidelines. We have worked quickly to investigate the issue and to identify those parents that needed to be informed. But apparently back in 2011, it was revealed that more than 100 patients, most of which were also children, had been given incorrect vaccines. Children who came in for meningitis vaccines, for instance, were given the MMR vaccine instead of just the individual jab. Right. So it's, especially vaccinations, it's close to my heart. And
we're now seeing the government pushing for all babies to have yet another vaccination against supposed stomach
rotavirus, yeah,
Right.
and then there's another vaccine coming out. Well, it started for whooping cough.
Right.
That pregnant mums are being given an injection to prevent whooping cough.
So we are saying to the audience today, and we'll continue to say, please do your own research into the vaccines and actually what is contained in the vaccines to make your own decision as to whether these vaccinations are desirable and indeed safe.
Yeah,
but of course,
Vax Truth, I think, is a very good website, Vax Truth.
and also do look up a lady called Christina England.
Yeah.
On the internet. She has done a lot of very good work in exposing what's really going on.
Yep.
We're just going to flag up here Sergeant Danny Nightingale, who's the SAS sergeant who's been jailed for possessing a pistol. This is a terrible story, but it's very indicative of the state of Britain at the moment, that people are out there doing the job. If they fall foul of the system, obviously we all become criminals. So this man is still in prison as the result of having a pistol after serving overseas. Now what I can say is that there is some movement in the press at the moment. So obviously the Telegraph is picking up on this story. The Daily Mirror has also picked up, and they are supporting the fact that Sergeant Nightingale's family and his wife, of course, have now started a full campaign to get this man out of prison. It's a shame that he's in prison. Meanwhile, the MPs who have been fraudulently spending public money or starting wars overseas are still not in prison. But the good news is that there is now a campaign which is starting to move on the internet. So have a look at Oath of Allegiance. Just put in Sergeant Danny Nightingale. And credit where it's due, this MP, Patrick Mercer, we've just missed off the bottom, it should be MP for Newark, I think, has also come forward. Now this MP has got a military background himself, so his family saw wartime service with the Sherwood Foresters, and he's been serving in the army himself. So he's come forward to see whether he can head up this campaign. So if you feel strongly on this issue, and I assure people that the UK column certainly does, can we recommend that you get in touch with Mr. Patrick Mercer to give your support and to see what can be done. But the key to it is that the wrong people at the moment are being put into prison. Talking of criminal activities, some of the papers are now picking up again on the fact that not only has the Speaker frightened off some of the Westminster officials who were monitoring expenses, but here we have MPs who are now starting to get squeamish over whether they reveal information about their expenses, and in particular who their landlords are. Obviously the scam being operated is to do with renting property between each other.
Yeah, I've got a few little facts here. At least 2 MPs are renting from their colleagues. Jessica Morden, who rents a property from fellow Labour MP Madeleine Moon. 2 other Labour MPs, Ian Mackenzie and Linda Reardon, are also in similar arrangements. 6 former MPs are continuing to benefit from the parliamentary expenses by letting out their properties to current MPs. These include Jonathan Shaw, a former Labour MP, who lets a property to Kevin Brennan, Ian Stewart, another former Labour MP, letting a home to Jerry Sutcliffe. Several peers are letting properties to MPs, while also claiming taxpayer-funded expenses in the House of Lords. These include Lord Flight, who is former Tory Shadow Minister. He's letting a property to Keith Simpson. Baroness Tongue, a former Liberal Democrat MP, is letting a property to Steve Williams, who's a Lib Dem MP for Bristol West. And several MPs are renting properties from some of Britain's wealthiest families. They include Nick Bowles, the planning minister. He's renting from the Burley estate. Matt Hancock, the business minister, is renting a house from the Vestey family. And Liam Fox, former defence secretary, is claiming for rent on a property from Viscount Cranbourne. Out of 320 MPs claiming for their second home, 51 have requested that their landlord's details are redacted. And one of those people is Nick Clegg. Others include John Denman, Lucinda Berger, and the lady who's in the jungle, Nadine Dorris.
Right.
So Cleggy Boy has decided he doesn't want his landlord's name disclosed.
Well, of course, the reason that they're giving, and this is a key part of our report today, is that they think that their landlord's name should be kept secret on security grounds. So these MPs are getting very, very nervous the moment that people start to dig into what they're up to. And they're worried that if these details are put in the full public domain, that they are at risk. They're becoming very fearful. Now, this pattern has also follows across with the political charity Common Purpose, which of course hit the press in a major way over the weekend. So on screen, this is part of the original Daily Mail report. And in it, it's describing how Common Purpose broke the law in order to smear their critics. But the key part of this is that it concerns how information is used. So I've just highlighted part of the article there. I'll read it for those who can't read it for themselves. On the specious basis that freedom of information legislation was being abused, causing damage to the charity's reputation, Common Purpose compiled a blacklist of the individuals concerned. Common Purpose officials sent private, personal details of these people to public bodies around the country with the warning that new freedom of information requests about the charity from those listed should be treated as vexatious. In other words, Common Purpose tried to block the legal rights of those individuals and prevent their freedom of expression. So here we've got the same sort of pattern that basically the general public wants the information to find out exactly what the dirty deeds are going on. What do the MPs do? They squeal that they can't give the information because they may be at risk. And this is exactly what the political charity Common Purpose has done, except it added a twist that it attacked the individuals who were asking for information quite reasonably and lawfully through freedom of information. Common Purpose attacked and smeared them as vexatious. So this is the pattern through the country at the moment, and we'll give a little bit more meat to that because we can show you part of the blacklist that Common Purpose compiled. So this is in a total breach of data protection. Of course, the Information Commissioner's Office decided that it wasn't going to prosecute Common Purpose, but I think I'm correct in saying that the Information Commissioner's Office is a supporter of the charity itself, so perhaps there was a little bit of vested interest. But in the database, there was names, dates, and also details of freedom of information requests. So when a member of the public asked their local council, for example, how much money they'd spent on Common Purpose training, Common Purpose was interfering with that lawful process in order to block it. So this is a very serious abuse of not only the Freedom of Information Act and the Data Protection Act, but of course freedom of speech. If we follow the pattern through, no pun intended, of course here we've got Chris Patten, head of the BBC, and we'd like to point out, of course, that Chris Patten is a Common Purpose supporter. The BBC, as both the Telegraph and Guardian and the Daily Mail have revealed, has spent over £126,000 on this political charity, which doesn't like to tell the truth. And I think it's very significant that the head of the BBC is clearly approving of the suppression of information, because the BBC has refused to reveal the names and positions of their BBC Common Purpose graduates. Of course, when we suppress information, nasty things happen, and certainly dark rooms, closed doors are of great help to the paedophile rings, which seem to be have been operating through the BBC. Tim
Davie, who is acting head of the BBC, has come out with a statement. The revelations of sexual abuse by Jimmy Savile we've heard so far and that are still coming into the police are awful. The BBC has made clear its revulsion at the thought that these criminal assaults were carried out by someone employed by the BBC and that some may have happened on BBC premises as well as in hospitals and other institutions across the UK. I want to extend a profound and heartfelt apology on behalf of the BBC to every victim. The next step is for the staff, past or present, who know of anything they think might help the police investigations into allegations against Jimmy Savile to come forward. If you have an allegation about the inappropriate behaviour of BBC premises or BBC presenters or other staff, you can inform BBC Investigations Unit, or if you would rather call anonymously, use our whistleblower hotline.
We've just got a slide of that. This is also the Mirror report on that hotline.
Yeah.
What we'd like to say to the BBC on air today is that the evidence that the BBC does not want to fully investigate the abuse of young people is becoming too overwhelmingly apparent as their own journalists and reporters shy away from looking at the evidence of child abuse. But UK Column will be dealing with that in due course.
Interesting how they've set up their own investigations unit and not sort of outsourced it for an independent investigation.
Well, presumably if you put in a Freedom of Information request to see who is actually running that unit, the BBC will turn it down. Meanwhile, across the country, it's now being reported that hundreds of paedophiles are reoffending while being monitored. So presumably they're not being monitored, which is why they're able to reoffend. But the key point is we're now seeing the wider mainstream media starting to report the proliferation of paedophile abuse, but what they're not doing is getting into the nitty-gritty of why this is happening and why paedophiles in positions of power and within the political system are being protected.
NSPCC are calling on the government to provide an annual breakdown of the number of paedophiles as well. Right. Interesting, that.
Interesting, but doesn't fill many people with confidence.
No.
We'd like to point out that Thames Valley Police have recently, well, just come into the news today because they've arrested more paedophiles in an operation, I think, in Buckingham.
In High Wycombe.
High Wycombe, in fact, which is part of the Operation Bullfinch. This is the roundup of paedophiles in the Oxford area. We would like to continue to point out that despite these actions by Thames Valley Police, Thames Valley Police under the leadership of Sarah Thornton have so far failed to take any full and detailed investigation into the abuse of young people at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. What's becoming more apparent from information coming into the public domain is that Thames Valley police officers did not follow approved procedures for interviewing and investigating the abuse, and it would appear that there has been a cover-up as part of the teamwork within child protection in Oxford.
This case, it's not called Operation Bullfinch, and I haven't got the name of it, what they're calling it now, but it's for High Wycombe and Buckinghamshire, and their Detective Chief Inspector Vincent Gray said in terms of child exploitation, the general premise is there will be a number of victims. The force said officers arrested 8 men, I believe yesterday, aged between 21 and 28, one aged 20, 3 aged 21, 2 aged 22, and so on, up to the age of 28. And Mr. Gray has said we will not tolerate child exploitation in Thames Valley.
I think we've got
and we have a video.
Short video here.
Hi, my name's Vince Gray. I'm Detective Chief Inspector in Thames Valley Police. I'm currently in charge of investigation into child sexual exploitation in the High Wycombe area. First of all, can I just reassure you that these type of offences are quite rare, and both Thames Valley Police and our partners locally are doing everything we can to manage these investigations and provide the necessary support to victims or any other witnesses. In relation to this particular case, we have one young lady who's been very brave and courageous and come forward and explained to the police and our partners as to exactly what's happened to her. As a result of that, we've executed a number of warrants today in High Wycombe, and men are in custody with us. Whilst the investigation is ongoing, some of my team will be out in the community looking to speak to further witnesses and any other person who wishes to come forward in terms of being a victim of child sexual exploitation. That person can be male or female, but we would urge you to get in contact with us, where we'll deal with your information in confidence and be sensitive in terms of what information you provide to us. I can give you 2 numbers, either one of which you can call to provide us with those details. The first one is from within the local authority, and that is for the first response service, and the telephone number is 01296 383962, and the second number is a hotline that we have set up, which is 01296 396 396, and that line will be up and running until the end of January next year. So,
Okay.
So I wonder why, if the Thames Valley is so concerned about the victims.
Well, I think a lot of officers
Will.
are doing a good job, but the key point is that somebody in the higher echelons of Thames Valley Police is absolutely not telling the truth over what they're really doing with these investigations, because whilst we've seen a large number of Asian men picked up, that what is clearly not happening is that Thames Valley Police is not acting on information being brought forward about white abusers. So whether there's a political agenda running here or not, we don't know, but we're going to continue to dig. With an eye on the time, we're going to end at this point. If you want to know what's happening in Britain, what you are watching is essentially the political structure of Britain being undermined and collapsed. And this is being done by introducing a criminal element into Westminster. And of course, as Senator Sevray of Jersey has pointed out, governments love paedophilia because that is the means by which individuals in positions of power and influence can be controlled. So if you look at what's happening in the press and just think about it, do your own research, you'll start to see that somebody is pulling apart democracy in UK. You want to stop it, tell a friend.
Yeah. Can we just say it's our meeting tomorrow evening at the George in Plimpton.
For anybody local who'd like to come.
Yep, 7:30. And there'll be no UK column on Friday because we're all going on a road trip up to Stoke-on-Trent to the Moat House Hotel for the British Constitution Group annual conference. So,
Okay,
yeah, thank
so
you.
we'll say thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.